welcome to the Big 12 Mafia Show. I'm your host, Nathan Bomber Brown. With me is one of my partners. That would be Moen Show. How we doing, Moen?
Doing good, Nate. Thanks for having me.
Sure. That's kind of funny because we're together anyway. And then we have Doug Rohan with us. Rohan Law. Where are you located, Doug?
Hey, Nathan, thanks for having me on. I'm out of Atlanta, Georgia, in the
Okay,
heart of the
very good.
Southeast.
We appreciate you being here.
My pleasure, absolutely.
It's a big day. We got news coming at us left and right. One that strikes me really hard: Pete Carroll is retiring, and my Seahawks are at a crossroads. So I'm not sure where we're going to end up with that. But we appreciate you being here with us tonight.
Of course, there's a
Um,
couple programs going through some sea changes now.
There are, and we'll talk about those. In fact, we're going to do a lot of basically open mic, and I want you to walk us through what some of those things look like, because there is a domino effect that sort of happens when we have big changes like this. So we'll definitely do that. Really quick, let me do some business. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and consider becoming a member of the Big 12 Mafia family. Just go to the join link on the Big 12 Mafia page, pick one of the levels and become a paid member. It's a lot of fun, and we have a good organization here. I think bring good product and a lot of stuff about college footballs on the show. At the same time, make sure you're following us all on Twitter, and then turn on your notifications on Twitter and on YouTube so that you know when our shows are always coming up. So I'm just going to go right into it. Normally we have a minute of a lead in, but there's so much news. I know I've only got you for a little bit of time. So I think we'll just jump right into it if that's okay with you.
Go for it.
All right, let's start with the biggie. And the biggie is Nick Saban and what's next for Alabama. So kind of what are you hearing about this sea change, and were you expecting this?
I sort of was. I had heard about them buying his property in Jupiter earlier this season. I think in August, news of that came out. I also have a friend that's with Mercedes-Benz, and she had advised me about him purchasing two new Mercedes-Benz dealerships down in South Florida. So it seemed evident to me that he was laying some groundwork for kind of the retirement or what was coming next. And then, of course, as a Florida State fan, we saw the college football snub to work the mental gymnastics to make sure that Alabama got in over Florida State, the conference
Right.
champion. And so by putting Alabama and Texas in, they really, I think, wanted ESPN and the college football playoffs to have that magical Alabama versus Texas grand finale. And of course, that would have been a crowning achievement and a great way to send off Nick Saban. And I think now we can kind of understand what some of those backroom conversations were that caused the college football playoff committee to go through the mental gymnastics they jumped through.
So you really think it's a bit of a conspiracy to get them in, that he had tipped his hat to other people, maybe Kirk Herbstreit or other people, that he was going to be leaving at the end of the year?
It's Occam's razor. Those things that make sense are usually the simplest answers to those curious questions that we have. And I think
Right.
that it was something that he probably was contemplating. I've seen some other articles talking about what some of his other interviews were like leading up through this season, that perhaps there was some conversations about maybe not. But regardless, we knew based on his age of 71 that it was likely to be happening, if not this year, then next year. He had expressed repeatedly disinterest in the NIL changes that were taking place and the transfer portal. And look, let's be realistic. The reason why Georgia, Alabama, and some of these other dynasties have flourished over the years, including Florida State in the 90s, was this ability to stack talent. Your 2 deep, 3 deep, 4 deep roster might put on a beating like, I don't know, 63-3 on some other team that wasn't quite up to your standards in terms of the 2 deep and 3 deep roster. And that's something that the NIL and the transfer portal is going to allow for. There's going to be more parity. It's a perfect time. I think 1 year earlier might have been the perfect time to go to a 12-team playoff, but you're not going to have these teams that stack talent year over year over year like they have in the past.
And it's been like he's been the Federal Reserve of talent, but NIL and the transfer portal has basically weakened that. Now he's not 6 deep in every position. He might only be 3 or 4 deep. So,
Yeah,
and that's all 4 or 5 star athletes. So
don't get me
you
wrong. Alabama has the money. I mean, it's not
right.
about having the war chest for it, but you're not going to pay as a recent example, or Earl Little Jr., a defensive back that transferred from Alabama to Florida State. If he's second or third on the roster, you're not going to value him, and you're not going to pay the same amount of money that Florida State or some other programs might pay when they know this can be a day one starter.
That is incredible. Let me get some shout outs, and then I know Moen's got some questions. First of all, David Hackett was first in the house. He says, hello, Nathan, Moen, Immaculate, and Wild Ute. Happy New Year. Great shows, entertainment, and informative. Thank you very much, David.
Thanks, David.
Being here. Joey Z is in the house. The Big Lubbock. Joey Z says ducks on suicide watch. That's Dan Lining. We'll get to that in a minute. The Big Lubbock is here. Good to have you here, Lubbock. Addison Book, who's an Ole Miss guy, says he finally retired. Sorry, glory and hallelujah. So Ole Miss might be losing their coach. So I'm not sure you want to be cheering for that, Addison. It's quite possible your coach could be out the door. Let's see here. Anyways, we'll get down to Nightbot, who's doing his due diligence here. I appreciate everybody paying attention to the Nightbot messages. We spend time on those, and it'll help you follow the show. Let's see here. Dawn in Kansas is here, casting for Chrome. Boy, we're pretty full tonight. Mooncat is here. James Fishback. This is my best friend, people. Moen's best outfit. Jamie, how are you doing? Jamie and I go back to elementary school, and one of these days I'm going to have him on the show. He's a Washington State alum. He's Washington Athletics, and I can't wait to have him on. Jamie, if you have time, text me, and I'll get you on the show now if you have any questions. You've never been on, but I'd love to have you live. Boy, that's a great surprise. That tickles my fancy there. Sergeant Pickles is here. Good. Sergeant Pickles says, evening all, calm before the storm. And then he also says, side note, landing to Bama after Duckies have been trolling us about DeBoer to Michigan would be peak karma. And anybody who's been following the job changes recently, DeBoer has been on at the top of a list if we get a retirement out of Jim Harbaugh. So I'm going to just stop right there. And actually, I'll say one more. Chad Bracey, say yes to Dan Laney. Nice to have you here, Chad. All right, we're going to get out of those and actually get back to this. Have you ever seen, and I know you've been following this for a long time, have you ever seen anything like this where it one move has this cascade of changes?
Always. That's what happens every time you have one of these major dominoes. And the higher up the hierarchy in the college football arena you have these dominoes falling, the more widespread that change is going to be. So the fact that this is one of the pinnacle programs unquestionably in college football today, it's going to cause, coach after coach after coach to be shuffling around, and it's really a big game of musical chairs that'll probably last for several weeks, if not months.
Moen.
We always hear about coaches' buyouts. We know that the boosters generally pay for the buyout. Where does the money go from the buyout? Does any of that trickle back to the boosters from the other school?
My understanding is that that's paid directly into the coffers of the college itself. The thing here is Alabama hasn't had to have a buyout of another coach for 15 years. So
right.
Again, it's one of those situations where price is not going to be an option, or money is not going to be an obstacle to Alabama securing whoever they want. It's just a matter of, will somebody want to step into the shadows of a legend? We saw that Florida State with the difficulty in trying to get somebody after Bobby Bowden. We did have Jimbo Fisher come in for a few years with some success, but that was a unique situation where they named him as coach in waiting before Bowden's departure. Every other significant coaching departure across the landscape of college football usually results in somebody coming in, stumbling, doing 2 or 3 decent years before ultimately being replaced. So as somebody whose coach's name, Norvell, has popped up 5 or 6 deep in the list, I hope they don't get that far down the list. And we'd love to see Dan Lanning or Lane Kiffin, show up as the next Alabama head coach and let us continue with the momentum that Norvell's been able to establish.
Is there a concern that Norvell could move?
I've seen him pop up in about 60 or 70% of the articles naming what coach is next. He certainly has done a great job turning the ship around from 5-7 to 10-3 and now 13-0 before the Orange Bowl debacle. So I think he's established himself as a young up and coming coach. I think probably Alabama would look at him as not quite being ripe or ready. So perhaps we dodge the bullet with Norvell this go around. But if they hire somebody that only works 2 or 3 years and then gets fired and they're looking again with 2 or 3 more years under his belt, I would think Norvell might be a more prestigious target down the road.
We're currently running Moen just put up a what do you call them, a poll. Everybody, we encourage everybody to vote in that poll to see what's Dan Lanning's future. I think that's a big deal. And we want your input on that, and then we'll talk about that at the end. It looks like we got a new member, which is really kicking. Let's see who this new member is. Sorry, Lonnie Johansson. Let's see. Cherie said she would come on the air. That's his wife. Sorry. Let's see. Lonnie Johansson. Thank you very, very much for becoming the newest member of the Big 12 Mafia family. We really appreciate it, and it's good to see you here. Make sure you leave your comments in there, and I will try to get to as many of those as I can for all the members today. Okay, so let's talk dominoes. Saban's out. Who's next?
Well, if Lanning and Kiffin are the 2 top choices, then that means Oregon and Ole Miss are going to have an opportunity to replace their coaches, and that's going to go down to the second, third tier of some other opportunities and some other options that are out there. I know most schools like to try to go with somebody with experience, and that's one thing that Kiffin has, Dabo Swinney has. Those coaches have been in the Nick Saban system, and so that's why I think they're attractive targets. So if we've got Clemson now looking for a replacement for Dabo, then that's going to lead to another ACC opening, which one of the second tier coaches might be interested in taking, which then opens up the Pittsburgh job or something. I think Syracuse is the only one that's probably safe in that regard because they just hired their new coach over there at Syracuse. But that's the type of situation where you're going to have this merry-go-round. Maybe they pull somebody out of the NFL, somebody that's in retirement. I'd love to see, some of those options come from outside the college football arena, because then that'll limit the collateral damage that comes from that hire.
Moen.
Well, the results are in from the chat. The chat believes Dan Lanning with 56% is the obvious choice. And since Ohio State plays them next year, I agree. Get Dan Lanning out of there. Dabo is number 2 at 21%. Kirby Smart at 13%. Only 8% of people seem to think Lane Kiffin will leave Ole Miss to go to Alabama.
I think there's a personality conflict there that'll be challenged. I think Lane has really leaned into his persona on Twitter and with his humor, and I just don't think that's something that the uptight boosters at Alabama would tolerate.
We've got another super chat here. Let's get to this. It's Lonnie Johansson says, YW
You're welcome.
And you're welcome, and go BYU, go Big 12. Yeah, BYU's new, obviously, into these upper ranks and leagues. But let's talk about some of the schools that are A school properties that might lose their job or might lose their coach to somebody else, like a Michigan, like an Alabama. Who knows what happens with Texas if Sarkisian moves on? Where do we anticipate those coaches are going to be? Let's just do a real quick head count. Do we think if let's see, Harbaugh leaves,
going to the NFL, I think that's a realistic possibility.
And that is
the Chargers.
That DeBoer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
is that DeBoer that would take that job?
I think he's the sentimental choice for sure after his performances earlier in the year.
Okay, and then Oregon.
I don't know enough about the Oregon system. Obviously, we know they don't want Mario Cristobal back, but
right.
I'd be curious to see who would be attracted to that northwestern corner of the country, where college football is a different animal than what we experience down here in the Southeast.
That's true. Moen, pick a couple schools
for coaches leaving.
Yeah,
I think Harbaugh leaves. Harbaugh leaves to the NFL. I think they probably promote Sharon Moore. I think that more and more, the more I hear about him, they promote Sharon Moore to be their head coach.
And that's the assistant coach.
That's the OC who was the coach for the last 3 games.
Right. Okay.
As far as Oregon goes, if Dan Lanning leaves, they're probably going to want somebody with some offensive firepower. I think they may take Grubb from Washington, the OC there, and
Okay.
bring him down to Oregon. The other one that I fear the most is Brian Hartline could go out there and start pulling all these five-star receiver recruits out there. But I think Oregon would go with somebody on the offensive side this time.
Now that Washington and Oregon have been promoted, quote unquote, do those positions become more anchor schools? Are they final destinations for coaches now? That's to either of you. What do you think?
I think with Nick Saban leaving, Kirby Smart and his and Georgia, I think there's very few schools that are going to be final destination schools. Obviously, the money is good, but it's going to be hard for anyone to again recreate the dynasties that we've seen, and that in turn is going to create less loyalty to those coaches. When you have 2 or 3 good years and then 10 years off, I think you're going to see more of the cycle of what we saw from Washington this year, where you get a couple players that are key, instrumental anchors to your team. Maybe they come back an extra year before going to the NFL, but I don't think you're going to have the year after year after year dynastic runs that you had before, which then in turn makes a less loyal fan base and booster base when your coach has had that 13-0 season and then backslides to a 10-win season or an 8-win season. So I think you're going to see a lot more of those vacillations between year over year results. And I think that's going to end up resulting in no school truly being a destination school within 10 years.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, because in my opinion, those programs are worthy of final destination jobs. I don't understand why Oregon has become a turnstile. Nike pays all kinds of money to coaching there. They're way subsidizing all their programs. How does Oregon, or why did it all of a sudden become this stepping stone job?
That I couldn't tell you other than to say that there is a human element to it.
Right.
Again, not to be the FSU homer, but that's the bulk of my experience. But we experienced that with Jimbo Fisher. He had 1 or 2 solid boosters and backers. And once there started to be some erosion of the recruiting efforts and some of the discussions over funding and certain issues at the school, in this case, a football only facility, then you had that situation where Texas A&M could come in and lure Jimbo away. So that's what I see happening more often than not. Personality conflicts, money being an issue, the transfer portal, NIL. I really think that this is going to usher in an era of parity that we haven't seen before in college football.
Sergeant Pickles has a comment here. He says, rumor is UW will go north of 10 million for the board to stay. So I doubt it will really be about the money. Good omen for me. Number 1 recruit in state Washington, 25 committed to the University of Washington. So I don't know. What do you think about that? That it's your league that they're moving to, Moen. What do you think about these jobs that used to be sort of stepping stone? Do they become final position, or is it always going to be they move from the west east?
I think there's always going to be this level of blue blood school, this level of dream job that
Okay.
people are going to jump to. If
Okay.
an Ohio State comes calling, they're going to jump. If a Michigan comes calling, they're going to jump. If an Alabama comes calling, they're going to jump, even from Oregon.
Okay, very good. Cleveland Rock says also could he give more explanation of how the gore really works? Can you explain that to our viewers?
Yeah, that's how we met Nathan. And ultimately, before the
Right.
Saban news broke, that was what we were going to be talking about today, was providing some information about the ACC and the litigation and the grant of rights. So what's happening, to give background information to those who haven't been following closely, the ACC has a grant of rights with all of its members signed through 2036. And so this provides a way for the for the ACC to have a stable platform to sell them to the networks, which they have a contract with ESPN. Now, that contract only goes right now through 2027. ESPN has a unilateral right to extend that deal from 2027 to 2036 if they choose. And so that's kind of what one of the issues were, that came out of this litigation between the ACC and FSU. The reason why FSU is upset about the current agreement is because we have an below market price tag already on the product that's being sold. So that means that the amount that FSU is getting is roughly $10 to $11 million this year. And then there is a baked in 4.5% escalation clause through 2036. Well, actually right now we've learned it's only through 2027. So that escalation clause means that the incremental increase of revenue to Florida State is going to get outpaced by the SEC and ESPN deal, which is going to be giving teams like Vanderbilt upwards of $30 million. So if FSU is trying to remain one of these top tier brands, get back to the picture of the playoffs and national title, they're going to have to compete with programs at a $20 million deficit annually. So this idea that a grant of rights is locking us in to an existing contract is what the FSU is trying to overcome through these declaratory judgment actions. Both ACC and FSU have competing declaratory judgment actions. FSU filed in Florida, ACC unsurprisingly filed in North Carolina. And so that's where we are right now, is in a position where we're waiting to see what a judge would say in anticipation of a breach of the contract, whether or not the grant of rights is enforceable against FSU. If it is, then that means FSU has to continue giving all of its TV revenue for all of its home games to the ACC through 2036.
But they obviously made a strategic decision that that cost may be worth it, right? At some point, they had to just know and take a step off. Clemson backed up, Miami backed up. FSU was the only ones that stepped forward. And I just think they had to know that, one, that we all believe that they have a landing spot in the Big Ten. ESPN shunned them. They're going to be going to the Big Ten anyway. But the idea is you're willing to make a strategic decision, spend money to make a change, to stay more relevant, right?
Yeah, the status quo doesn't hurt. Even if FSU loses the litigation, all it means is that we're locked into the contract that we're already signed. So the worst case scenario for challenging this and losing is that we have to pay some attorney's fees to the ACC lawyers. By contrast, if we can get out for $120 million for the buyout, add in maybe some compromise in a settlement with the ACC for that grant of rights to make it maybe $200 million, then we're talking about not having to pay the maximum combined rate of $575 million, which is what the ACC is trying to argue. So if the FSU can get out of this deal for $200 million or less, and then we can annually earn $30 million in the Big Ten, then that money offsets itself in far fewer than the 9 years that we're currently locked in after 2027.
Moen.
Suppose the lawsuit doesn't go your way, doesn't go Florida State's way, I should say. You said that you're kind of locked into the contract. What can Florida State do to offset the damages? Because, I mean, you can't run a $20 million, $30 million, $40 million deficit for the next 9 years and remain a relevant program and just the way college football is headed.
I think you're right. I think that's why the Board of Trustees basically said this is an existential threat to the existence of our program as a premier program, and we don't really have a choice in whether or not we challenge this. I would handicap a full loss, complete desolation of the FSU lawsuit at about 10% or less. I think there's an 80% chance that there is some kind of compromise, that both sides are just posturing to try to reach a deal. And there's, still a 10% possibility that FSU could be successful. The lawsuit that was filed is actually much stronger than I anticipated. For those who don't know, the basic ideas are, first, that there was a breach of fiduciary duty on the part of the ACC by bringing in these subpar members like SMU and some of the others, that they're devaluing the property that they're trying to sell. They're also working from a defensive standpoint and increasing the number of members so that 7 members can't just go off and dissolve the ACC altogether. So that's the breach of fiduciary duty. The breach of contract comes with the playoff snub and the ACC failing to provide for the benefit of Florida State as a premier brand and as a team that was worthy of a championship participation. They've frequently they've failed to negotiate a strong enough contract with ESPN, one of the specific points is in 2021 when ACC was talking to ESPN about this grant of rights extension. ACC gave ESPN this unilateral right to extend from 2027 to 2036 without receiving anything, any form of compensation in return. So that's where the breach of fiduciary duty and breach of contract comes. The concept of, well, you signed a deal, you didn't have to sign the deal, you signed the contract, you can't walk away from the contract. Well, there's two problems with that. The first is you're discounting an entire area of the practice of law, which deals with negotiating and breaking contracts. So clearly it does happen because that's an entire industry within the legal community. But second, and one of the things that the complaint mentions is this idea of a Hobson's choice. The idea was that back in 2013, when Maryland left the ACC, so the ACC jacked up these penalties for leaving, they went ahead and said, look, you don't have to sign this contract. If you don't sign the contract, you owe us $284 million. Well, Florida State didn't have $284 million even just after winning the 2013 national title. So even though we were given the right to sign or not sign, it really wasn't a choice. We were told based on the other members voting in support of this contract that we needed to sign or leave, and we couldn't afford the penalty. And then you add to that the reality that at the end of the day, ESPN has such a bargain basement price for the product. The idea is that this penalty for leaving, this penalty that keeps us in, is a restraint of trade. And that's one of the third elements of this lawsuit. The idea that the ACC watched Maryland walk and then instantly jacked up the penalty for anyone else walking simply works as a punishment and has no relevant basis in their liquidated damages. The idea that, look, the ACC will suffer. Heck, it's possible that ACC ceases to exist after 10 years when all this goes through, if it goes through the way FSU wants. But the idea that you have to pay $500 million is really just a restraint on the free market, a restraint on trade, and that's in contrast to what the laws of the state of Florida allow, especially an organization that is a state agency. It's a public school of the state of Florida. So this restraint on trade makes that grant of rights invalid. So those are really the three strongest arguments in this litigation to try and overturn the grant of rights.
I want to thank you for being here, Doug. We've got questions coming left and right from our viewers, but first of all, I really just want to tip my hat to you. You and Danielle, I think, have done the best job that we've had on our show about explaining the legal issues that are with this. This is FSU and the ACC, but with all of college football, it's very complex. Realignment has made things more difficult, and your explanations are so clear and concise. I'm very grateful that you decided to share some of your time with us tonight. And after the show, and maybe in a couple of weeks, we'll have you back again to sort of explain now what FSU is going to do in a victory dance, if that's the case.
That would be great. I would love it.
Let's get to a few of our questions here. First of all, Cleveland Rocks. Thanks for being here, Cleveland Rocks. He's one of our members. He says, does the attorney believe the remaining Pac-2 has the legal right to keep all the money? That's a big thing for our channel.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating how there was a successful defense of the grant of rights in that case. That's one of the things that some of the people at Florida State have been saying incorrectly. Oh, nobody's ever challenged a grant of rights. No, we saw what happened in the Pac-12, in the Pac-2, and specifically also in the Big Ten, where was Texas and Oklahoma leaving. They did have to pay a portion of those monies. So it was only a 2-year period remaining on that grant of rights, but it still was a successful defense of that grant of rights. And my understanding is that the remaining members, in this case, the 2 teams that are left, would then have that paid into really not the school directly, but into the conference. And if those are the only 2 members of the conference and they have an agreement to split that money amongst them, then that's something certainly their board can do as well. But the conference and the members are separate entities, and that's one thing that people need to be able to distinguish. Because the Pac-2 is getting the money, there is going to be some siphoning off, for lack of a better term, of those funds to the conference as opposed to the member schools.
The Pac-2 is obviously a standing issue. They're wanting to stay relevant as a conference. We're going to have some more questions assigned to that, but it is interesting that they won their legal dispute and the conversation completely changed. It went from who's going to control the money to we give us as much as we can for the schools that we're leaving. And I thought that was extraordinary, the way that conversation turned. Let's see here. Here's a good one. LK Knoll, thanks for being here, LK. Did Commissioner Phillips have the authority to sue FSU without going to the membership?
Okay, this was a great question, and whether it was you or somebody else that posted this on Twitter, I did see that earlier, and I did take a look at the bylaws. In this situation, what you have is the ACC defending itself as an entity. So it's not operating on behalf of the other members in this particular instance. So I do believe, in my opinion, that the ACC has the right to unilaterally go proceed with this litigation. And the comparison that I would give you is one of the technical issues that they're debating in this litigation is, did the ACC have the right to extend that 2021 deal with ESPN unilaterally without talking to the members about that? Because there is a contract for the grant of rights in 2013. There is the extension of the grant of rights in 2016. Then there was the 2021 negotiation with ESPN that didn't involve the members. The idea there is that the ACC was unilaterally negotiating with a business partner regarding the distribution of the content that they had as a right of those previous contracts that were signed. So this is a similar analogy where the conference is operating on its own basis to defend itself and its contract from one of its members. So it didn't require a vote of the other members. And truthfully, even if a vote was required, I think there's enough anti-FSU sentiment within the ACC that they probably would have carried the vote.
Right, but who's to say once it's exposed, there's all kinds of things that can happen in the PR world and negative marketing and stuff that possibly could have changed people's minds. Let's hear. We got a super chat here from Daniel Gygax. Thank you, Daniel. He says, do you see the ACC FSU cases being sent to federal court? Is the jurisdiction, is that going to get superseded and this is pulled up into a federal case?
The law nerd in me is most fascinated about this jurisdiction and venue question. Where the lawsuits were filed and who filed first really is not a huge factor. As I mentioned in our last conversation, just to give some context, normally when a plaintiff sues a defendant, you sue the defendant where the defendant resides. In this case, the ACC sued Florida State first, but they sued in North Carolina, arguing that Florida State had ties to North Carolina because they're a member of the North Carolina-based ACC. ACC suing the defendant, or FSU suing the defendant ACC, chose to file in Florida, again bucking that trend, claiming that the diversity jurisdiction issue is provided through the ACC partnering with FSU, FSU signing its contract in Florida and doing business with FSU in Florida. So both parties have an argument as to why it should be in their state. Going to the next level, however, you start to see that I think there's a stronger argument for Florida. Maybe I have my Homer hat on, but all of Florida State's transactions, business, revenue, dealings, all exist within Florida, whereas all of the dealings of the ACC are spread amongst all 7 or 10 ACC states where they do business. So that pulls, I think, the jurisdictional argument in favor of it being decided in a Florida court. Now, state versus federal is the crux of this question. I do think that because there is a diversity of the states, a diversity of the residents of the parties, that then allows ACC to petition the Florida court to remove this to federal jurisdiction. And it also gives the FSU the authority to file in North Carolina federal court a request to remove that suit to federal jurisdiction. So now you have two competing federal districts deciding then who should hear this case. And the good news there is that the federal courts are a little bit more insulated from the state politics and the emotions and the attitudes. And I think between a litigation question of North Carolina federal versus Florida federal, I do think that the Florida federal jurisdiction wins out. So the filings have to be made. By my calculation, they have to be made by January 23rd, whether that's a motion to remove or a motion to dismiss either of the complaints. So I do think that there's going to be some more interesting developments in the next week or 10 days. And I personally think that this will end up in a Florida federal court.
That would be a godsend for Florida State, obviously. All right, here's another question from Terry Kane. Thanks for being here, Terry. Florida State is a state-funded school, and state will help pay legal fees. Miami is a private school and gets no help. That's why they're holding back for now. That's an explanation for why Miami didn't do anything.
I think that's a great point, and I think the same holds true for Clemson. Same holds true for North Carolina. While those are both state schools, this is a very interesting angle, Terry, and I appreciate your insight. But the other schools that are most likely to follow Florida State out of the ACC are thinking, well, let's just sit back and not spend our legal fees until we see where this is heading. So they get a chance to follow the playbook of Florida State if and when Florida State is successful.
These questions are so much more sophisticated than I can put in my head. We have some of the best viewers of any shows that are out there on the internet, and we're really diving into the detail and not answering these questions with sort of fluff, 10, 12 word answers that people are used to on the internet. Here's another one from Devil Frog. He says, so then ESPN blackmailed and extorted ACC members. That's a question.
I wouldn't put that on the ESPN. ESPN has a shrewd business plan and business model, and their goal is to do whatever is in ESPN's best interest. Here's where the context helps fill in those gaps and provide some additional information. What you have is the ACC operating from a place of weakness, knowing that the SEC is the bigger brand. I will admit it, it's the bigger property. So the ACC has for 2 decades looked to ensure their survival. So while ESPN didn't blackmail and extort ACC members, I do think that the ACC has acted in bad faith, ensuring that they had the sweetheart deal with ESPN and then holding their members to the accountability of participating. Look, the reality is Florida State, Clemson, Miami, North Carolina, some of those top tier ACC schools should be able to find another home in this realignment process. But there's a lot of schools on the bottom half of the ACC that are perfectly happy with the status quo, and they are likely to not get a better chance. Nobody wants to invite a Wake Forest or a Syracuse into the Big Ten or the SEC. So those schools are fighting for their survival within the ACC. It's the ACC that was operating without disclosing all the details in the benefit of the ACC. And I'll go one step further and give you this detail as well. When the original ESPN contract was being negotiated, the brother of the ACC commissioner owned Raycom Sports. And so for the price of $1, maybe even $0, they ensured that the second tier broadcast games that ESPN didn't want to broadcast went directly to Raycom to ensure Raycom's continued existence and survival. So there was some nepotism involved in these original negotiations, and all of those factors played in to the ACC really not pushing the value of the product that they were offering, and that's what's leading to the economic disparity now that we're getting into late 20s and early 30s for these television contracts.
I want to thank Devil Frog. He and I are the ones that came up with the Mafia name almost 2 years ago. So Devil, thank you so much for being a member of the channel. It's great to see you. I just want to tip my hat to Moen, who's doing all the back office for all the messages on comments and also answering people's questions. I can't do that and run the show, so I want to make sure Moen, everybody needs to thank him for all the work he's doing.
Thanks, Moen.
All right. What? Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks is right. All right, here's another one. Don in Kansas, who's also one of our members, says, who authorized the ACC lawsuit against FSU? Was there a secret vote? Was it unilateral action by the ACC commissioner or someone else?
Well, who the specific party was or parties were, I can't tell you. I don't know. But obviously the commissioner was deeply involved in this process. All you need to know from that fact is the lawsuit was filed by the ACC within hours of Florida State even just announcing an emergency board of trustees meeting. The sunshine laws in Florida require these meetings to be held in public, require advance notice of them taking place. So the ACC did not rush into a conference room and hack out a 181-page document to file just because the Board of Trustees announced a meeting. They had prepared that weeks, if not months in advance, and most likely right after the August Board of Trustees meeting, where FSU said this is not sustainable. So that process has been going on for quite some time. The ACC has been preparing for this moment for months, and it wasn't until the Board of Trustees meeting was announced that the ACC went ahead and filed this ready-made petition that they had sitting in their desks.
Thank you so much, Don. Appreciate you being a member of the channel. TJ Bean, who's not a member, come on, TJ, you got to do something about that. It has asked, Doug, given ESPN's we may take it or leave it option in 27 illusory consideration, you can probably diagnose what he's saying there.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard anyone bring this up.
The consideration is an important term, and that's something that is required of any contract. So anytime a contract is signed, yes, there must be consideration. And that's one of the arguments of why this grant of rights should be invalidated. The decision by the ACC to give up or to give ESPN the unilateral decision of whether or not to extend is a huge factor in this. I don't think it's directly related to your question because the consideration needed to be in place with the 2016 agreement with ACC and FSU. What it does provide, however, is a very interesting avenue for ESPN to, of course, be altruistic, and we would love for ESPN to step up and do the right thing and go ahead and exercise their grant of right, or even better, or not grant of right, exercise their option, but to renegotiate that option and make it more on par with a second tier or third tier conference. Now, obviously, they're not going to do that. So the other side of the coin is ESPN can sit back until February 2025 and see what happens with the ACC. If 4 of the top brands leave, not only will ESPN not want to pay the bargain basement price, they may not want to pay anything for the ACC. And that's why I call into question whether or not the ACC is going to even survive long term as we go through this reevaluation process, the realignment process.
Consolidation, and there's that the idea that the tighter ship you run, the more you let loose of the organization, so you'll drop off schools. Oregon State and Washington State just paid that price, and the ACC is just the next one in line. Let's see here, Moen, did you want to do some gift memberships?
Oh, and you want the Big 12 Mafia to give some memberships
Yeah,
here?
let's do that. Why don't you tell everybody?
Let's do that. We've got a lot of people here. We're going to go ahead and give some memberships. Make sure when it pops up in the chat, y'all, you got to grab it in the chat. Let me go ahead and gift 5 memberships here to the chat.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Moen. Appreciate you doing that. Everybody sign up for those, get those free memberships, and then please consider giving your own memberships to people. It's a nice way to share the wealth and get more people on the show. We really appreciate that. Movie Time Blues, he's been around here. I appreciate you being here. He says, how many ACC programs actually have a chance to move up? This is what gives me pause when thinking about who might leave.
You want to talk about the importance of a musical chairs and the coaching carousel. This conference realignment carousel is the same, but as a factor of 10, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars at stake in these conferences as they decide who they're going to partner with and who's going to end up with a chair or seat at the big table. I think Florida State and one other partner are likely to go to the Big Ten. Once the Big Ten and the SEC reach about 20 members, I think that they're going to struggle to get much bigger than that. So that means that really there's probably only 2 or 3 seats remaining for ACC members. The questions are who are going to want to take that leap. In the case of Miami, to give a little dig there, they have not been really powerful since they've joined the ACC. Maybe they want to stay in the ACC so that they can be the top dog of a weekend conference. Their AAU participation and their research seems to indicate that they would probably be a better fit for the Big Ten as a travel partner. I jealously, because I'm here in Atlanta, would love to see Georgia Tech and their research and academics come along with us to the Big Ten, because I'd like to have a home game.
Don't you think they have a chance? We think they have a chance.
I think they're one of the less mentioned possibilities. I
Okay.
think that they have a lot going for them for the academics and the research aspect of it. What I don't know is the television draw. That's all this is about, is eyeballs. And I don't believe Georgia Tech has a very strong viewership rating. That's where Clemson is superior. North Carolina. The reason why North Carolina, Clemson, and Florida State make sense is because that gives Fox and the Big Ten a footprint in the Southeast that is logical. Adding Miami to that doesn't really provide much because South Florida isn't a college football hotbed.
Right.
And again, they've struggled with relevance over the last few decades, truthfully. So since 2001, their last national championship, they've won every offseason since then, but that doesn't mean necessarily that they've matched those results on the field. So I think that we would see Florida State, Clemson, and North Carolina as the most likely options. Second tier being Miami and Georgia Tech. There's an interesting twist in that the state legislature of North Carolina has a law on the books that say NC State and North Carolina must be in the same conference. Now,
Wow.
this legislative session, they're bringing up a bill to overturn that, to remove that law from their books. So we'll be curious to see if that works. But the reality is that NC State and Wake Forest, those colleges are very happy with Tobacco Road and the ACC and their leadership. So those schools may end up staying behind in whatever's left of the ACC. Whether the SEC wants to pick anybody up, they haven't seemed to telegraph that they have any interest. I personally don't want to see FSU in the SEC after the snub. I don't want anything to do with ESPN and College Game Day. Big Fox Saturdays noon game, me please. That's my goal at this point.
Fox is the bomb right now, absolutely. In production value and staff, you cannot beat Fox in their production. Really quick, let's call out our 5 new gift memberships. Went to Masta, Russ Stringer, Anthony Jackson, Anthony Manzano, and Maggie and the Knowles. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. I hope you enjoy being a member of the Big 12 Mafia family. And make sure everybody that's watching right now, subscribe to the channel. Give us a thumbs up. That always helps. And then make sure you're following us all on Twitter and turn on your notifications. All right, we have a $10 super chat. Let's see. We will go with this from TJ Bean. $10 says, Doug, could ESPN's unilateral option to withdraw from the ACC channel broadcast rights in 2027 be considered illusory consideration? It is not an out for FSU. Sorry, he was cleaning up his earlier statement.
Yeah, I think that is a better way to word that phrase. Yes, I do think that ESPN gained a benefit, gained a contractual benefit without having to pay anything, just getting that right. So we're not even talking about the act of exercising that right. It was at the moment in 2021 that they earned that right where there wasn't consideration. So from an illusory consideration, it's not ESPN and FSU, but it's the act of making that agreement that then calls into question whether or not FSU should be subject to that grant of rights and subject to that contract with the ACC.
That's a great way to clean it up too, because the wording before was a little bit mixed, so you weren't sure what question to answer, right? So
exactly.
I appreciate
Good job,
it,
TJ.
Bean. Thank you. We got another one that says Ryan Willie. Good to have you, Ryan. For $2, wanted to say FSU and Clemson to the big. That's the one everybody's constantly talking about. Recently, Miami stepped up. They want to be considered also, but isn't this the one thing that people always wanted to happen, going back years, those two schools moving up together, possibly to the Big Ten? Maybe it might have been the SEC before, but not now.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, what makes college football so amazing is those rivalries, those year in and year out matchups, those games of, titans that are playing for supremacy. And, Clemson and Florida State have been the tops of the conference for the last 10 years. Florida State has been down. I'm happy to readily admit that during the Willie Taggart and early Norvell years. But as it stands, if you take a 10,000-foot view over the last decade, it's really Clemson and Florida State. That's why the conference did away with divisions. They wanted ACC championships involving Clemson and Florida State, because when it comes, again, to the eyeballs, those are the two supreme powers. And second and third, or third place and fourth place really aren't even close.
This isn't a question from the comment section, but I know we've talked about it before. This idea that the ACC has any value. Let's say the ACC is worth $1. If you pulled out Florida State and they take 39 cents with them, really, what are you owning then at that point?
And that's why I think ESPN is very keenly interested in seeing what happens, because with them no longer having to pay beyond 2027, that then legitimizes FSU's argument that the grant of rights doesn't hold value. So to argue originally that we had to pay $574 million, that was based on a presumption that this escalating ESPN clause accounted for that annual increase. Now, as part of this, we didn't have access to those agreements and documents earlier. Now that we realize that those contractual rights only exist through 2027, now the right exists for the ACC to continue to take the revenue from Florida State through 2036. But right now, that value is $0 because they don't have that agreement. It's going to be something. There's not no value in that. But if ESPN doesn't take that extension, then Fox can step in and say, hey, we'll give you, 50% of what ESPN was offering or 70% of what ESPN was offering.
Right.
So there will be some value in that, but now there's a very strong argument that that full freight of $574 million is not what's owed by FSU if they do choose to leave.
And I think that's a reasonable thing to put forward. What would ESPN be buying if all of a sudden you lose your two, bell cows? I just don't understand. And that's why your idea that the ACC could blow up, it has water. I think there's some thought that the ACC, though, will stay together as an entity, but it would be this much smaller, much diminished conference, like Oregon State and Washington State, Stanford and Cal and SMU and Wake Forest and Boston College. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, look, the ACC has tradition and has history. FSU has been a member since 1992, and their academics are reasonably good. Their other Olympic sports and non-Division I football sports are very strong. They routinely show up in the soccer championships, softball championships. So there is value in the ACC brand and in the ACC conference. It's just not on par with what we've now learned is the remaining Big Four contracts, Power Four conferences. Right. And as these consolidations continue and you're whittling it down to just the Big 20 and the SEC 20, then there's going to be little to no TV value left for those top tier programs to continue to flourish.
Very, very true. Another super chat from Lonnie Johansson says, who will get into the Big 12 from the ACC? Do you have any ideas there?
There are some other valuable properties, whether it's NC State, Wake Forest, Miami. That could be a second option for Miami. There are other schools with strong academics that I think would like to make sure that they ensure their survival. And if they truly believe that the ACC is in a death spiral, then I think some of those other programs would move over. Syracuse, being in New York, that's what attracted the ACC conference to Syracuse. That's an important TV market. And perhaps the Big 12 wants to expand its reach to the Eastern Seaboard, and something like Syracuse and the Carrier Dome would be something that would be attractive to them.
If you were to give a percentage that Clemson and or Miami get left out, the SEC stays at 16, and Miami and Clemson aren't on the maybe Florida State goes with Georgia Tech. Is there any chance that those two schools could end up in the Big 12?
Sure, I think that's a reasonable scenario. Look, at the end of the day, Dabo and Clemson have been slow to respond to the changing college football landscape with the NIL, with the transfer portal. That leadership probably infects all of the Clemson hierarchy, which means that the Clemson program probably isn't jazzed about moving either. So either they stay in the ACC and hope to salvage what's left of the reputation, or maybe after FSU and Georgia Tech leave to the Big Ten, they realize that the Big 12 is their next best option.
Ryan Willie brings up a good question, and thank you for the super chat again, Ryan. It's great to have you here. What do you think of ESPN trying to keep exclusive rights to the CFP? And I'll put an addendum on that. Don't you think that report was kind of timely to say that ESPN was going to keep it, just assuming that Fox was going to be left out? What did you think about that?
I think that the finances prohibit ESPN's exclusivity. ESPN is already struggling with profitability. They've just signed a $3 billion agreement with the SEC, and they're going to be struggling to try to make the dollars on the balance sheet work. So, what we're hearing now is that right now the rights for the playoffs are valued at about $470 million. And so, in order for ESPN to extend beyond 2025, which is when the current contract is up, they're going to not only have to make a substantial commitment for those future years, but also probably re-up the value for the 2 years left on the contract. So one figure I've seen is that they're going to need to pay $600 million for 2024 and 2025, and then somewhere north of possibly $1 to $1.3 billion for the remaining exclusivity that exists through the next term of their contract. The TV experts, the contract experts are saying that within 10 years, the value of the playoffs as live watching eyeballs are on it is going to be much closer to about $2 billion. So the NCAA, who's the party that's selling their services, selling the rights to the college football playoff, they're not going to be interested in cutting off their nose. They have no loyalty to any specific broadcast partner. They have a lot going on with ESPN. They just signed a deal for all of the other 19 men's sports and 22 women's sports finals and championships. But the reality is that Fox and ESPN as a split partner makes much more financial sense, because then each of them can pay $750,000 for a collection of those 12 playoff, or 6, 7, 8, 9 playoff games that they're going to be playing. So I don't think that the finances will be in such a way that ESPN can afford to maintain that exclusivity. And I don't think the NCAA is going to want it. I think they're going to want to go to the highest bidder or bidders, and that a joint or split pairing of those conference championship games is going to be the most likely scenario.
This Congo brings up a point that, we've heard of the wheeling and dealing that happens in the back rooms at the NCAA and with all the college football athletic departments. He says Fox not bidding on the CFP, maybe it's a trade with ESPN to allow those schools to move and trade for the broadcast rights. Could you see anything? That seemed pretty convoluted, but we have heard that spoken of in the past.
I don't know, and I'm not privy to the conversations that Fox is having behind the scenes or what ESPN's true financial situation is. What I do know is that Fox wants to become a national college football brand, and that's why they seek a foothold in the Southeast. I saw a report recently that came out on Twitter. I presume it's accurate, but it goes back, I think, 20 years to who is the principal sports broadcaster across all sports and all eyeballs, just cumulatively assessing who has more viewership. And that's Fox. Fox for the last 3 years has succeeded in outpacing ESPN in viewership. So from ESPN standpoint, they want to try to beat back the increases that Fox is experiencing. And I think Fox personally smells blood in the water and sees an opportunity to take a big chunk out of the ESPN monopoly that they have with the Southern football teams, and that's why they're going to be pushing so hard for FSU to join the Big Ten and gain the foothold.
Bob Thompson agrees with you. We spoke to him, and he definitely thinks Fox is going to be in on that bidding. So the idea that it was a no bid or a bid that they just weren't interested in seemed really ludicrous. And it was a real reporter who made that report. Who was that? Moen, do you remember who wrote that report? Pete Thamel, maybe, for ESPN.
Anyways, I think you're right. I think it was Pete Thamel.
Yeah, an ESPN reporter put out something positive for ESPN. I'm shocked.
I know, right? It just the gall that they have, it seems, it's pretty crazy.
Look, they live in a bubble. They think that everything they say is the gospel, and at the end of the day, they don't realize what everybody out there is saying. And that's what the benefit of Twitter is. And that's one of the reasons why I enjoy it so much as a platform. Of course, you get all kinds of crazy saying all kinds of crazy things, but legitimately it allows secondary sources to challenge the nonsense that ESPN pushes in their narratives.
Exactly right. Well, you've been here an hour. You're welcome to stay as long as you want. I just don't want you to think I'm taking advantage of you, Doug.
I've
Okay.
got a few
So
more minutes if you have a few more
I do
questions.
have a few more questions, yes, but thank you so much for all of your time. I don't know what you charge an hour, but I'll have to figure out a way to pay you back. If you'll DM me your address, even your work address, I'll send you one of my rally towels. That would be cool.
That would be great. I would love that.
Awesome. That's fantastic. I'll do it. Just DM me your address. Devil Frog says Bama should have D'Amico Ryans on their short list. Any thoughts about that? And that
Not
goes to you too,
particularly.
Mullen.
No, nobody's going from the NFL to college, guys. It's
Okay,
just
there we go. Okay, that's what I'm wondering. Congo says ESPN traded Al Michaels for a Disney character from NBC, and ESPN made a deal with Fox to let out ahead of the Big 12, and that means Oklahoma and Texas. Again, I don't know. I don't know what to say to that. Jan Hulk, all the way from Slovenia. He's our Slovenia member. Thanks for being here, Jan. Says, yeah, but problem is if they put that article out there closing on that CFP. You guys understand what Jan's saying there?
he's saying
Not
if they
sure,
put the
Jan.
article out, they're closing in on it. That it's
Oh,
near the
okay.
end of the line.
Okay. Thank you, Jan. Here's a follow up. I hope Fox gets some games too, would be nice. Well, I
I
think
hope they
all of
get
us
all
agree
of
with
them.
that. Yeah, we like Fox here. I think Fox is fantastic, and I want BYU on more Fox shows, believe me. Let's see here. Conundrum had a question a while back. Can the ACC subpoena FSU's communication with the Big Ten and or SEC regarding the landing spot?
Absolutely. I think that this is a very important point that some people have mentioned. And, some of the nervous Nellies are asking, well, how can FSU go through this process without having a handshake agreement or without having a landing spot? Look, FSU has to operate on faith that the numbers speak for themselves. There is no communication. I can virtually guarantee, I hope, as a litigator, we see our clients do dumb things all the time and they put in writing things that they shouldn't put in writing. But the reason why they haven't had any open discussions regarding a landing spot is because then you open up a claim from the ACC for tortious interference with business practice. So in that case, you can't have the ACC or FSU engaging in formal conversations with the Big Ten or with the SEC saying, hey, yeah, if we leave, you'll take us, because then that would expose those other conferences to a much larger, broader litigation from the ACC. So I'm 98% certain that that email doesn't exist, that those text messages don't exist, but I'm certain that some guys drove up to a Buc-ee's on the interstate and
That's
said,
right.
yeah, or yeah, is there interest? Are we talking? But it was a face-to-face conversation with no witnesses, so that there was plausible deniability. But I can't fathom a world where somebody is sitting on an email right now saying, FSU, if you leave, you can come join our conference.
I always imagine these negotiations happening at the Sopranos nude bar there in New Jersey. I could see that's a perfect location to have such a negotiation. Anyway, a couple more questions. Cleveland Rock says, just curious if the buyout comes for FSU, is it paid by tuition costs by students? If so, how is it legal to pass that on to them?
That's a great question. No, the tuition fees are a fraction of the budget for Florida State University, and there wouldn't be any excess to pay any type of buyout. I can tell you right now, between finishing paying off Willie Taggart's contract, the resurgence and the success of the football program, the boosters and the collectives operating at a far higher revenue stream, building the football only facility that they've just broken ground on, they have a commitment from some high dollar boosters that'll match whatever the buyout fee is. So the boosters themselves will be paying those additional fees in order to get out.
Which makes sense because we're talking about athletics, not the education part of the school. And so the athletic guys, those are the guys that are out bragging, right? I graduated from Florida State. We have 29 championships or whatever it is. That's bragging, right? And I
And
think that's why it's so important.
one great example of this, and something that may come to a head in the next year or two, is an investigation as to what happened at the University of Miami. There are some allegations that money was pulled from the academics, from the endowments, to try to get Mario Cristobal over, to pay for his contract, to pay for some of the assistants. And if that happened, there are going to be some pretty significant reprisals, because, as I understand it, that's an improper use of their funds. So those are the types of things that you can get in trouble for. And I don't think that Florida State is going to make that mistake.
I didn't know there was a firewall there. Did you know, Moen, there was a firewall between the endowments and sports? I just thought it was a choice. There's actually
There's
something in
actually,
legislation.
yeah, there's usually language in there that says it can only be used
Oh,
for academic benefits.
okay. I did not know that. So all along, when the Pac-12 was talking about the size of their endowments and how important that was, that had absolutely nothing to do, even though we knew that, told over and over, that had nothing to do with their choice of conference, right?
Not athletics, but choice of conference, yes, because you want to go to a For example, Stanford got into the ACC with Duke and North Carolina, these
Right.
highly touted educational systems, big on research. Washington got into the Big Ten, big on research. So those
Okay.
endowments do mean something. They just don't mean much for athletics.
I think that's important. We need to make that clear. All right, we're going to let you go. I appreciate you being here, Doug. This last comment, you can answer it from Sergeant Pickles, who is, by the way, University of Washington grad, and he's happy to be in the Big Ten. So what he's saying is Georgia Tech Hive Assemble. I actually think Georgia Tech could be an easy ad because they say yes to an even more reduced share than FSU, and Atlanta travel is easy.
Yeah, I think there would be a lot of interest from both of the parties to be travel partners. Whether there's a year that separates them, there's some talk that FSU is going to leave first, and then whatever other teams are interested in traveling will come a year or two behind. But again, for geographic reasons, Tallahassee and Atlanta being about 4.5 hours apart makes a lot of sense for those second tier school travel schools. Because remember, when Florida State leaves the ACC, all of the sports are leaving. So that means the volleyball teams have to travel, the track teams have to travel. So all of those additional travel costs, if they're split among diverse states, are going to prove to be very problematic in the budget. So having one or two local schools here in the Southeast will help minimize that increased travel expense.
VC Knoll, I know you know him, says, but ESPN had no comment. That was in relation to the negotiations for the college football playoff. So,
Of
all right,
course.
Doug, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. We'll do
Absolute
this
pleasure.
again, and have a great night. And then make sure you send me that address, okay?
I will do that. Thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate
Yep.
it. Take
You're
care.
very
Thanks, Doug.
welcome. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Oh my goodness. What do you say, Moen? What do you say from all that? So I gotta send Jamie's wife Cherie the invite to the show because she's an Alabama alum and I want to have her talk. So why don't you sum up what we just heard from Doug?
Well, we heard that Doug thinks that the lawsuit that Florida State has put together is pretty strong uh, against the ACC. He thinks there's about an 80% chance that somebody reaches a compromise. The figures he listed were between 125 to 200 million dollars as a possible settlement amount. So we'll see how that goes. But I think we a lot of good information, lots of great questions from chat. You guys killed it out there tonight. Um, I mean, and he was giving you good answers too. I couldn't keep up with some of it. Some of it was way over my head, but I kept up with a good deal of it. Uh, feel like that guy had a sling blade. I didn't understand all of it, but I understood most of it.
Okay, see, that is a perfect comparison. Sling Blade is exactly right. He was on those I don't want to call them rants at all because it was packed with information. We're going to slice those up. We're going to dice them and put them back on Twitter. If you missed it, if you're just joining us, you just missed Doug Rohan. We did an entire hour of talking about legislation. Sorry, talking about the lawsuits, FSU ACC, and we talked some Nick Saban with him. So we encourage you guys to go back and watch that. The last hour has been dynamite, and we appreciate you being here. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. Follow us both on Twitter, and make sure that you turn on your notifications after you subscribe so you know when the show is always on. All right. Let's see here. I'm still having trouble sending that out, Moen. So could you just run through some comments?
Sure.
Awesome.
Tony Lawson says 20 is plenty. I disagree. I think it's 24 is the final destination. Jan Hulk watches a lot of Fox games. I don't see much difference between ESPN and Fox. If FSU would watch for during championship week, they would not be unhappy with Fox too. Well, I disagree with you. I think the Fox picture signal is much better. There's a lot less motion blur on Fox games. I think they just have better camera work in general. You don't miss a lot of plays like you do on ESPN, where they go to a sideline reporter for some inane BS. And I love Gus Johnson. Gus Johnson calling games is probably as close as we're going to get to Keith Jackson in this lifetime.
Hold on. I got it. Whoa.
Keith you don't like Gus Johnson?
No, I like Gus,
said
but
close to.
Yeah,
close to.
I'm not saying Keith Jackson. Know who Keith Jackson is.
Yeah.
Moen and I both know who Keith Jackson is. Called Pac-10 and 12 Big 10 and Pac-12 games for 50 years. Keith Jackson. Look him up on YouTube. All right, I'm back. Let's see. Let's get to some of these other comments. What a lively bunch of comments tonight, guys. We really, really appreciate you contributing and being part of the show. Cleveland Rocks, $2, says, really enjoyed the show. Well done. Thank you. I'm having a stuttering fit tonight, so I apologize for that. But other than that, I think our conversation went really well. Let's get here. Congo says Notre Dame is the end game for the Big Ten. Moen, they not going to stop till they grab Notre Dame. Maybe the Big Ten go to 24 teams. Okay, Moen. 2 minutes.
The Big Ten, that's the ultimate goal, in my opinion. That's the final destination for the Big Ten. It's 24 teams by 2030. Notre Dame is in there, Kansas is in there, Georgia Tech's in there, and they steal Texas A&M away from the SEC.
And how do you tell us how you feel about Notre Dame?
I hate Notre Dame as a school. As far as putting them under the boot heel of the Big Ten, I love it. I love the idea of strangling the last bit of independence out of them, putting the boot right on their head as they're in the water.
You done?
I'm done.
Okay.
That was it.
Moen posted this earlier. I think this is a great answer. Devil Frog, while the buyout is cheaper, those NFL head coaches don't want to deal with recruiting, NIL, and everything. Yeah, I think Pickles, with Seattle, they're going to get a coach. I think they're going to, Jim Harbaugh would be fantastic, but probably going to be another coach from the NFL. As far as coach going to Bama, for that matter, going to Washington or anybody else, rarely does that happen from the NFL. So, and I know you know that, but it's just one of those things where today the dominoes are going to fall after Alabama's news today. Nick Saban is leaving. In case you missed that part of the show, let me bring up that banner. Nick Saban and what's next for Alabama. Put your questions in the comment section about that. We didn't get a lot of time to go into it because we needed to jump to the ACC and FSU stuff. But if you have questions or ideas about Nick Saban and his next steps, or even what Alabama's going to do, please put them in the comment section. Boy, I was considering earlier today, once I saw the Saban news, that maybe I'd do a show tomorrow just to talk about, just taking questions about Saban and the dominoes that are going to be. I haven't made up my mind, but I think that's a thought on my mind here. Devil Frog says, 24 is ideal, saying number of teams in a conference. 2 12-team divisions for 4 6-team divisions make scheduling easier and better facilitates conference playoff formats. What's your number today for these conferences in this next round? And we just lost Moen, who just left for some reason. Okay, well, I'll tell you what mine are. Mine are 20 teams in the Big 10, 20 teams in the Big 12, and 18 teams in the SEC. So I don't think the SEC goes more than 2 more teams. So I'll say that again: Big 10, 20, Big 12, 20, SEC 18. What do you think, Moen?
Well, for 2025, I think that's probably pretty close. Beyond that, no. I see the Big Ten going to 24. I see the SEC sticking at 20. I see the Big 12 eventually hitting 24 as well.
24 just gets so ungainly, doesn't it?
Doesn't matter. In consolidation with all the money going around, it's what they want. They'll just basically split it into region. You're just going to have regional conferences within a bigger conference.
Right. I understand what you're saying. Tony Lawson says Kansas, Georgia Tech are not worth a full share, and current schools aren't taking less. Well, I don't know that that's true, Tony. Washington took less. Oregon took less. SMU took less. Cal Stanford took
he's
less.
talking about existing Big Ten schools don't want to take less. But I'm
You're
saying,
talking about the dispersion. Yeah, you're right.
right. But
I
I'm saying
misunderstood what you were saying.
Kansas and Georgia Tech are way out into 2030.
Right.
Right now, they're taking.
Yeah,
they're just taking two guys, and Florida State does deserve a full share. It'll bring up enough money. Miami and Clemson, they might get on the cheap.
It's quite possible. Yeah, they're desperate. So Lee Taylor says Arbaugh is going to Texas Tech.
Which Harbaugh? Jack?
Hey, there you go. The dad.
Maybe get Jack out of retirement.
He's like 90 years old. Is he going to be coaching Texas Tech? That's a funny joke. Let's see here. Ryan Willie says college football passed by Nick Saban, just like NFL passed by Carroll and Belichick. The games have changed. Nick Saban doesn't want to deal with boosters like NIL. And look, he's won like 120 games and lost 12 or something. What's his incentive to stick around and deal with all that crap?
Yeah, he has more first-round picks than he has losses.
That's true.
At Alabama.
Probably more than double it. Yeah.
It's I think it's like 44 versus 37. But let's not confuse things. Nick Saban is the greatest college football coach of all time.
Yeah.
To do what he did, it's incredible. I wish that Ohio State could have a quarter of that luck or that skill and a head coach to pull that off. But I want to let every Alabama recruit out there know, any Alabama student, we're building something big here in Columbus. Jump in that portal and come on over, especially offensive linemen.
Oh, here's Jamie's finally got to me. Let me send him this invite. Okay, Jamie, all you do is click on the link and she can join. There you go. I just sent it to you. Thanks for doing that, James. All right. Let's see here. Let's get some more comments. These comments are fantastic. Tony Huey, Lanning has to be the front runner, coached under Saban, Norvell, and Kirby before taking the head coaching job at Oregon. What do you think?
I still like Dabo Swinney. I think they take the safe pick.
Really?
He's got Alabama ties. He's won national championships. He's a safe pick. You run him for 3 years. If it doesn't work out, you get somebody new.
In my opinion, Dabo Swinney is too conservative. Dan Lanning is overrated. I think they go to Ole Miss or they go to Texas and they pick up, the Lane Kiffins and the Sarkisians of the world. I really do. I think Alabama wants to stay at the top, and bringing in Lanning is a risk, and going with Dabo Swinney. Do you see Dabo Swinney really getting along with the Alabama boosters and NIL? He's already declared.
I think he gets along with the boosters a lot more than you would think. I think the boosters are old money and they want old money.
Okay. All right. Let's see here. Sergeant Pickles, Bomber, you best believe I have already built 2022 and 24 team big schedules. I know you have. We will do that episode. I promise, Pickles. I already told you once we do it. Pickles he's a nerd in dealing with schedules, and he's already built schedules with rivalries and everything else in the Big Ten that would make your eyes water. So we're gonna have a whole show just dealing with his schedules, and I think that would be a lot of fun because it gets people thinking. Okay, Pickles, I haven't forgot, I promise. All right, now we're going to bring in my best friend's wife, Cherie. How are you doing, Cherie?
Good.
Sorry about that. I tried getting the text to work, and it just didn't work. Mm-hmm. So tell us, Nick Saban's gone. What happens to Alabama now?
I hope they find somebody good.
I know. Do you have ideas who that may be?
I wouldn't mind seeing Kirby Smart back.
There you go.
He
That's
knew
another option.
Yeah, he knew most of the plays.
Of all the old coaches that went through there while Saban was there, which is the one that stands out most to you? Because there's been so many.
Probably Kirby.
Okay. And he's loose now. What do you think, Moen? What do you think about Kirby?
Yeah, I don't think he's leaving Georgia. He's got such a good situation at Georgia, has so much talent around him. He's over there licking his chops right now and picking up Caleb Downs and every other starter from Alabama right now.
Well, the season being over makes it every coach I think is on the list. What do we have any idea what Kirby Smart's buyout is? It's got to be 10 million at least, right?
Yeah, I think it's 14 something.
So 14 million to boosters at Alabama and Georgia is
it's not the buyout's not the issue. I just think
right.
that what he's built there at Georgia, I don't think he's going to leave.
You have questions for us, Cherie? What's on your mind?
I don't have any questions. I've been listening to the whole Saban thing tonight.
Okay. Have we been entertaining? How about that?
Yeah, you guys have been good. And I just kind of got uninterested when it comes talk to about the ESPN and Fox and all that kind
I'm
of stuff.
sure. Yeah.
I didn't really care. I'm more of the SEC. I don't care about Pac-12 or whatever.
Well, we
Yeah,
won't hold it against you.
We know. We know. To be honest, we don't really have a dedicated SEC person. So when these shows come up, you're welcome to join us.
Yeah.
Let's run through some questions for all three of us. Awesome Clips says, what about the bottom dwellers in the big SEC, Indiana, Vandy, etc.? What do you see becoming of these types of schools in consolidation? Do you have any opinion about the schools like Vanderbilt in the SEC or Purdue in the Big Ten? What happens to those schools?
I don't.
You don't care at all, Cherie?
Gotta have somebody to beat
Yeah.
up on.
Yeah. What?
Big team's gotta have somebody to beat up on.
Yeah.
Okay, Jamie, good on screen, would you? Okay, this is my best friend, Jamie Fishback. Okay, what do you think about it, James?
So I said the big teams have to have somebody to beat up on.
And that's what we've talked about. Immaculate has said that several times. Moen, what do you think about those schools? I know you want to protect them.
Yeah, you got to protect those schools. But I mean, yeah, they need somebody to beat up on, and those schools bring other things to the conference. It's not all about football.
That's true.
Indiana and Purdue in particular, fantastic amount of research to come out of those schools.
Jamie, has your dad's mind changed about what's happened with Washington going to the Big Ten? What's the feeling up there in the Pacific Northwest?
Well, my dad, he's purple blood, all
Right.
He's fine with them leaving. But so I'm a Coug, WSU, we suck.
Right.
But a lot of UW done.
Say that again. We lost you.
So a lot of us were still rooting for UW to get it done.
Right.
But now that is over, okay, they're just another competitor. There's really no love lost for them leaving.
Right, and that's what we've heard from quite a few Cougars. The idea that the rivalries get broken up. Obviously, BYU, Utah were separated for a while. Having Washington State in different conferences. What do you think about that?
I don't know. It just breaks the tradition. Sherry and I went to the Apple Cup.
Right.
It came down to the last 3 seconds. That rivalry is always pretty good. Somehow WSU comes up with the plays and makes it close. So I don't know what that's gonna. I know they've got it. They're gonna play
the next 3 years.
Yeah, they're gonna play the next 3 or 4 years. They're gonna have one game. Next year's game will be in Seahawks Stadium, and then they're gonna alternate schools.
Well, it's a big loss. You guys have watched my show. You know that I really feel that's an important rivalry, and it's sad that it got broken up. Washington State and Oregon State are floundering right now, and it sucks. There's no doubt about it. Here's a statement from Philport76. Question: maybe Bama goes for Ryan Day. What do you think about that, Moen?
Yeah, I doubt they want Ryan Day. Most Ohio State fans right now don't want Ryan Day.
That's
So
what I was thinking too. That's what I was thinking
Oh
too.
yeah, he's Ohio. Is that what you said? He's Ohio State?
He is.
Oh no.
All right, Cherie.
Coach,
No.
Try to hold back your passion there, will you?
And
All
then
right.
and
Go ahead.
then Ole Miss, I just don't like that guy's. I don't like the coach's hair. I hate the way
Lane
his
Kiffin. You don't like
hair.
Lane Kiffin?
No, his hair drives me nuts.
What about Steve Sarkisian at Texas?
No, not a fan of him either.
Okay. So right now it sounds like you got no coaches on your
Kirby
horizon.
Smart or bust, apparently.
Kirby Smart.
well, I don't know if you remember the old Saturday Night Lives when they had Ditka and the Bears, and
Of
Oh,
course.
Yeah.
like maybe a couple mini Sabans could coach.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, guys, we got to get on to a couple other comments. Thanks for joining the show. It's so good to see you.
Yeah, we enjoy
Yeah.
the show.
Yeah.
I watch it more than she does, but
Yeah.
All right, Jamie. Well, make sure you're a paying member. We got dues and everything. Okay.
okay.
All right. We'll see you later. Love you
See
guys.
you guys.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
All right, that was fun. And now to wrap it up, we got the great Jen. Watch 400 people connect right now. Jen, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys? Can you hear me okay?
We
We can
can.
hear you.
Yeah, we've been extremely
Perfect.
busy. Doug was with us for an hour.
Oh
Answering
my
all kinds of good.
gosh.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, I would recommend everybody who's just joining now, if you didn't catch that first hour of this show, go back and watch it. Because Doug was, I mean, it was like crystal clear. He was kind of, Moen said it was kind of like Sling Blade. It was hard to understand everything he's saying, but it was really clear. Tell us what's coming up, or I mean, what's going on in FSU land right now. Catch everybody up to the latest news.
Well, there's tons of news. It's kind of crazy around FSU right now. I'm sure everybody knows that. Um, I so what all did I miss from what Doug said? Because let's see here.
He just went through the latest condition of basically what the lawsuit is. He talked about where jurisdiction went, just the basics. I don't know. Moen, is there anything else that stood out that you want to let her know about?
He talked a bunch of legal stuff. I didn't understand most of it, but I understood a good deal. But yeah, he mostly talked about, he thought it was a very strong lawsuit from Florida State. He
Yeah.
thought the legal merits were very strong. He thought there was about an 80% chance it would reach a compromise of some sort. He threw out figures of 120 to 200 million.
Well, I do agree with him on that. I think the settlement will come. I have been hearing in between 54 million and 120.
Okay.
So that's what I'm hearing. I'm also hearing that the ACC does not really want this to go to court as much as they're kind of fluffing their feathers about that they
Right.
want it to. And I think Florida State knows that.
So they got him
So-
down a little bit. They got him down, foot on the neck type deal.
Yeah, I think so. I think Florida State is well aware that the ACC doesn't really want to go to court on this. So we'll see. We will see. I think Florida State is planning on they're planning on paying as much as they need to make themselves available. Let's put it that way.
Okay. So
I
it's an
don't-
attractive. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I don't think that they're expecting it to be obviously that $500 million. But I think that they are ready and able to pay what they need to pay. But I don't think that they are expecting to go to court. Florida State would want to go to court. I don't think the ACC wants to go to court. So that's where we stand.
Are we still looking at a Big Ten on the
Yes.
horizon? Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that's changed.
Are you hearing about any other schools?
Okay.
I know you have
so-
sources. You don't have to say everything, but anything
No,
you feel like you'd share.
I think Clemson has moved up a little bit more than what they were.
Okay.
That's what I think. But again, I think Clemson's silence says they don't have that guarantee that Florida State does. And I think that North Carolina is the number one choice to come with Florida State. I don't think any of that has changed, but I expect North Carolina to go to the SEC.
North Carolina, and do you think Virginia?
Yes.
Okay. And did they take 2 or 4? Did they take the carry-ons, NC State and Virginia Tech?
So I think that actually, okay, so Virginia and Virginia Tech, I see going together. I don't think that they will split up unless Virginia can confirm that Virginia Tech will get a very good deal from the Big 12. I don't see them leaving them behind in the ACC. Now, North Carolina State is a more interesting one for me because there is a legislature meeting going to happen. And if North Carolina is approved to break away from NC State,
Right.
that's going to be the problem. I don't think NC State has a place in the SEC without North Carolina. And I don't think they have a place in the Big Ten at all. I don't even think with North Carolina. I think the Big Ten would prefer, I think if the Big Ten takes North Carolina, it's by themselves. I don't even think NC State's in that conversation, to be honest. So to me, I think Florida State would love it for it to be North Carolina, and they wouldn't have to worry about anything else. Like, they don't have to worry about politicking. They don't have to worry about any other schools. If North Carolina would go, they would be thrilled with that. I know a lot of people think that Miami, and believe me, I think Miami is in the mix.
Right.
But if Miami is in the mix and Miami goes to the Big Ten, it's not going to be for a couple years.
So they're definitely agitating, right? Trying to draw attention, them and Clemson. But I think it is, as we've said at the very beginning, it's interesting they didn't file with them. They were sort of waiting for somebody else to do the work, and in return, they might not get the Colorado bonus like Colorado got from the Big 12. They got some millions of dollars because they were the first school to move from Pac-12. So, I just find that really interesting. Moen, do you have any? I have a question here, but go ahead, Moen, if you have another one.
No, go ahead. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Philport 76, does Jen hear a particular timetable from FSU to get this over with? I like that, over with.
I really believe that this is going to be settled before August 14th of this year.
Right.
I do. I was hearing some earlier timetables, but I really think that Florida State is putting their feet in the sand here, and they are telling the ACC they're willing to go to court without any problem. I think they're trying to get that money down as much as they can. And I don't think like I said, I don't think the ACC wants to go to court, but I would say I think this gets done before that August date this year.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Florida State's in no rush.
Nope.
Right? They can drag their heels all the way up until that mid-August is what I heard, the August 14th date. They have no incentive to settle early. In fact, the longer it goes, the ACC loses more and more ground, doesn't it?
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's the problem. And I think that's the problem for the ACC right now. So it turns into kind of a game of chicken, I guess. And to see who hits first, but I don't see Florida State, blinking first right now. I think they are angry. I think they want out. I think they've been angry with the ACC for a long time, and I think they feel like they've got them in some sort of a bind. And if that means airing dirty laundry, I think Florida State's willing to do that, because if you think about who was the athletic director at the time when these things were signed, when this was taken care of, I don't think Florida State has any problem taking that person down.
Right. There's no love lost there for sure,
Mm-mm.
from what I understand.
I think if Florida State could make Stan Wilcox look bad, I'm going to say his name out loud. I will say it. If they can make him look bad, they are happy to do it.
Let's see here. Jan Hulk from Slovenia says Virginia Tech, UNC, Clemson to SEC, FSU to the Big, then both court Notre Dame. Does that sound reasonable? I'm asking both of you.
I think Florida State needs a travel partner.
So they need somebody.
They need somebody down there.
Okay. Jen, what do you think about that?
So I haven't heard they needed a travel partner as of right now. But if they did need one, I would guess it's going to be Clemson.
Clemson again. I don't know.
I know.
Nobody's been able to justify to me how Clemson or Miami are worth $70 million.
Well, maybe Clemson doesn't get a full payout.
Okay, say
Yeah,
they're worth 35 million. Even that is a stretch at this point.
I agree. Again, if Florida State, I'm telling you, I think it comes down to this legislature thing with North Carolina. But again, North Carolina's chancellor is an SEC guy. I think SEC is really circled around North Carolina. I think if Florida State makes that plunge, they go to the Big Ten. I think that's exactly where the SEC puts their daggers, their eyeballs on, is going to be North Carolina. And unless the rumors are true that the SEC now is going to play defense and take Florida State, North Carolina State, Virginia Tech, and be done.
Say that again.
I said, unless some of the rumors are true that the SEC is now trying to play defense.
Right. What were the schools? Sorry.
Florida State.
Okay.
North Carolina.
Okay.
Virginia Tech, and North Carolina State.
So the four schools,
Yep.
they would take those and then shut down. They'd be all taken care of.
Yeah.
Moen, I think you think the same thing, don't you?
No, I think Florida State. I don't think Florida State has any chance of going to the SEC.
No, I'm sorry. I was talking about the North Carolina and the Virginia.
Right. Those four schools, I think, do go SEC.
Yeah.
Depending. If North Carolina uncouples itself from North Carolina State, I think the SEC would push and add Clemson.
Okay.
Then it would be Virginia Tech, Virginia, North Carolina, Clemson.
What bothers me about it is I don't know that the SEC wants the Big Ten in Florida.
Well, they're going to get in Florida either way through Miami or Florida State. So, I mean, you can't fight a war on two fronts.
Yeah.
So
that's the one thing I could see. That's where I was kind of going. That's where I could see Miami being the one to come with Florida State.
Okay.
But I still don't think it would be right away.
Right. And that is a question, because whatever happens with those schools that are in flux really will hold the lifespan of the current ACC in their hands. Because if
absolutely.
any three of those schools go, pop goes the weasel, right?
I mean, I think Miami wants to stay in the ACC because if Florida State, Clemson leave, they can finally win it, right?
Yeah, they could be the boss. I could see that.
Yeah, I mean, they could finally win a championship. But I keep going back to Georgia Tech, and I know everybody says no. But if you're looking for a travel partner with Florida State, the academics line up, the market lines up, the stadium lines up. I'm just saying, I know it sounds ridiculous, and I know everybody thinks it's ridiculous for you to say. I'm sorry, I don't know. I mean, okay, so who do you think is Florida State's travel partner? I mean, and now if Notre Dame does it, like, this is all over. I don't even think the SEC adds.
Right.
If Florida State goes with Notre Dame to the Big Ten, I don't think the SEC adds North Carolina, Virginia, NC State, or anybody. I think they all stay the way they are. I think it's over.
Okay. I think Georgia Tech is a reasonable idea. We've talked about it here for months.
Yeah.
It's not something that just popped up when we were doing our realignment games in the summer. I think it was the first time I heard it was Moen just mentioned it, threw it in and said, hey, what about Georgia Tech? They line up with research. All these things look very common. We did a little piece on Georgia Tech even. And the idea that they would go isn't as silly as people make. I agree with you. I think Atlanta. I mean, my hell for recruiting. So, Moen, what do you want to add to that? Because as far as I know, you're the first person I've ever heard bring it up.
That's correct. Hashtag Moen was right.
There you go.
Georgia Tech has a strong history in college football, national championships in the 1990s, legendary coaches, Heisman coach there. The only downside is they have a very small enrollment.
Yep.
Compared to other schools within the Big Ten. I believe they would have the smallest
What
of
is
any
it now,
school.
you think?
I think it's under 10,000.
What?
Yeah, it's
Under 10,000 for a Big
it's a
Ten
hard school to get into. It's right up there
Yikes.
with MIT.
Right.
Georgia Tech is not a screw around school. They're not teaching underwater basket weaving. They're teaching.
So are they the equivalent of Stanford on the East Coast?
Oh yeah.
No,
100.
they're
Oh, here we
closer
go.
to Purdue. They're closer to Purdue.
Oh, okay, not Stanford.
Just engineering wise, they're an
Yes.
engineering centered
Okay.
school.
Okay, not necessarily all research, just engineering. You're saying.
Engineering, but they do a lot of engineering research.
Couldn't you make the same argument for Duke?
Duke's a private school. I don't think you could.
Okay.
And that's the issue with Miami too, because Miami's a private school.
Right.
They don't have their own stadium. We know, and this is not a troll, Miami fans. I get it. It's just the truth. It is the truth. And their facilities, they are re-upping their facilities. I know they're working on it. They've been working on it for a long time. But that's the problem with Miami too, because with the Big Ten, they love the public universities. They like what they would want to call the flagship university,
right.
which is also the detriment to Georgia Tech, right?
Right.
So I'm gonna bring in another dark horse here.
All right, I love it. Let's go.
UCF out of the Big 12.
No way. UCF to the Big Ten?
Look at their enrollment.
What?
Look at their research. Look at everything they've got going on there. I'm just saying. I haven't heard anything about that.
Ridiculous. I've just not heard it.
I'm not. Look, I've only heard a couple of people say it. I'm just saying it's not. That could be a travel partner. That could be a major. Right. They have their own stadium. Right. They are a research school. It's a huge enrollment. It's a huge public university. Look, I don't. I mean, I know. I mean, they don't have a national championship or anything. Well, I mean, not one that's not made up
on their own.
I mean, they made up their own.
You're the Big Ten guy, Moen. Jen has just blown my mind with the UCF.
It'll never happen because Florida State would never allow it to happen.
I don't think they would either. No.
Yeah, they're not going to put UCF in a recruiting position where they're recruiting against them year in and year out.
I love the conversation, though.
Yeah, it was just really for the conversation. I just think, and USF is already AAU. That's another
USF
one.
Is the other one. Yeah.
That's the other one. So I don't know.
Let's get to a couple of these comments here. Ryan Willie says for $5. Thank you, Ryan. Says Clemson has natties. Yeah. They do. And then I'm going to follow that up with this message from Tony Lawson, who says 2 national championships in the last 8 years. Sold out 81,500 seat stadium. Great TV ratings. Going back 10 years and longer. Clemson is a fine addition. I don't think anybody said Clemson wasn't a fine addition. I think we're talking about this game of kings, Game of Thrones, who goes where and who wins. Clemson and Miami are right now, they're right on the edge.
Yeah. I think it's a rat's race in between Clemson and Miami. And I think watching what each school does is going to tell us which one. I really just don't think it's Miami. I think if anybody goes with Florida State right now, if you had to put a gun to my head, I would say it's Clemson.
They are the logical choice. I mean,
Yeah.
but it's that North Carolina thing is a big
Yeah.
deal. Doug earlier, you probably didn't catch it. He said that law it was passed years and years ago, but there's
Mhm.
actually somebody has one right now. They're debating to
Yep.
break that relationship. So, yeah, North Carolina, I think, is really the plum, in my opinion,
Yep.
after Florida State.
I think if
Go ahead.
I was just going to say if North Carolina gets away from NC State, but again, I'm just hearing SEC for North Carolina because of their chancellor. Like I don't know. I mean, maybe that's not true. I think North Carolina is such a natural fit in the Big Ten. I don't know why they would want to go in the SEC. They're already middling in the ACC. I don't know what they think they would do in the SEC, to be honest. And to be fair, I don't know what they think they would do in the Big Ten. They'd probably middle there too. But so maybe they're just I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what the draw would be for them to go to the SEC other than to just have that patch on and they think they could become better.
Right. I think that's
Like,
fair.
I just don't know.
What do you think about this statement from Philport76, Jen? Says, I think FSU has most of the country outside of Alabama behind them in after this CFP debacle, so take their time and bleed that number.
Mhm.
You think there's something to that?
Yes.
You know, the upswell of support for Florida State, you think that's real?
I do think it's real, and I think you've seen that out of ESPN. Have you not noticed all the articles talking about how they've had to call in the FBI?
Oh no, I
Because
know it. I've noticed since it happened, but I think the
yeah,
general public, they don't really
yeah,
realize that, I think.
yeah, I do. And I've heard, I mean, just I live in SEC country. I live in Memphis, Tennessee. I live in SEC country, and I usually wear all my Florida State stuff everywhere just because that's just who I am. So, I mean, I always have people come up and be like, "Oh my God, y'all were screwed." It doesn't matter where I go; it just happens. It happens, and I think people are just tired of what ESPN and what that committee did. And I think, look, with Nick Saban retiring today,
Yeah.
does anybody not think that that was done? I mean, look, conspiracy theorists are now saying, "Oh, now we know why they put them in."
Right. Yeah, I've heard that several times tonight. Yeah. It's possible. Anything's
Well, I
possible with
mean,
ESPN. I wouldn't rule anything out with ESPN.
well, yeah, and the rumors of Nick Saban retiring have been going around for a long time. I have a pretty good source in the coaching world, and at some point maybe I'll talk to you about that offline. But
Yes.
I knew
let's do
this was
that.
happening. I knew this was happening. Not that he was retiring, today. I knew this was on the table. I kind of thought, just based off conversations that I had with this person, because usually I don't get information from them unless it's about Florida State, because I don't like to press any buttons. But I was told today this has nothing to do with Florida State, so don't be worried. So anybody putting Mike Norvell on a list, guys, y'all can just forget it. I can promise you that right now. I've already been told, and my source is 100. I have like the best one. So I'm just saying, I do think that this is about to get really messy as far
Right.
as now with Nick Saban leaving Alabama. You're going to have teams, and what is this about Texas A&M going to the Big Ten? This has to be fake.
Oh, Moen.
No, in 2030, at the end of the next media deal, they're going to get into Texas. They have to take a Texas school. I think Texas A&M at that point wants to get away from Texas again. They join the Big Ten.
Look who couldn't stay away from us. He said he was off tonight.
I was.
And here he's back.
I did everything I said I was going to do, and I look, and you guys are still going.
Yeah, it's all Moen's fault. No, it's actually we did an hour with Doug. It was
Nice.
fantastic.
Good,
And
good.
then Jen joined us. So, and you
Well,
missed my best friend. We'll have to do that introduction too. Anyway,
Oh, I thought
I'm
that
gonna
was.
leave this
I
question
thought.
up for you.
I thought I was that now.
You sure, of course. I have 10 best friends.
All right.
Chad Bracey says Lanning wearing a hat with an A on it tonight. That's a question. That's to all of you.
It's going to be Dan Lanning. I think Oregon fans are about to be sick
Again.
Gotten a
again.
few things said to me in background that it's already been decided. I was going pretty hard thinking it was Dabo, and now I'm kind of like,
I never thought it was
I
Dabo.
think it's landing, and I think it's going to be soon. And I think you're going to be seeing Saban on NFL Game Day next year. And I think he got a phone call that got him the job, and he was like, "Oh, well, screw these interviews. I'm out of here."
I love it.
Yeah. So I think it was Dabo up until last year. I think Dabo was always Alabama's replacement for Nick. I think that was always the plan until the portal.
You know, who was the guy that was brought on with NFL Game Day right for the national championship game for no reason really at all?
You're asking?
Who was
I don't
sitting
know.
right in the middle of that table? Was it the
Dan
guest?
Lanning.
It was Dan Lanning.
It was
Okay.
Dan Lanning.
And who's going to probably be with them next year replacing Lee Corso? Nick Saban.
Yeah.
So I think this has all been kind of lined up. Yeah. And now you've got
Yeah,
Oregon guys who aren't coming back, and Oregon guys are hitting the portal. And
That is a deep, deep conspiracy.
it
You're
is.
saying
Probably-
it goes back years
Yeah.
to where
No,
this is what
no.
we're going to do to let him retire,
Years.
bring Alabama
No.
in, and let them be
No.
the school that replaces Florida State.
I hadn't really thought about going back years, but I mean, Saban's gone on there probably more than any other coach.
I think he probably has an exit strategy he's been planning for a while.
And I'm
It's
sure.
been going on for a couple of years, I can tell you that.
Yeah, it feels like it.
Mhm.
Now, to be fair, I really thought if Alabama won it all once they were, forced into the playoff, I thought if they won it all, that he would definitely retire. Once they lost that first game, that's when I started to get a little iffy. But I heard yesterday some stuff was going down, but I really didn't, really want to say anything because Florida State fans were going through enough, and I knew that they were going to put Mike Norvell on the list. And guys, I can tell you right now, that's not happening. It's just not. It's Dan Lanning. Oregon fans, I'm sorry. You're always the bridesmaid, never the bride. I don't know what else to tell you. You got to get a coach in there that can win. You got to have them win a championship, or else they're going to leave. They're going to keep leaving. Maybe once they're in the Big Ten, it'll help. I don't know.
Sergeant Pickles is concerned about DeBoer leaving to go to Michigan, and he doesn't care what happens with Oregon. So what do we think about this? Now we've got this revolving chair, the musical chairs. People are going to be all over the place for the next 2-3 weeks. That's what Doug said, especially. Let's just do it really quick. Let's play a quick game. If Lanning goes to Alabama, who goes to Oregon? I'll say the school. You say who the coach is.
Oregon, Chip Kelly.
Okay. All right. Chip Kelly, UCLA lost a coach. Who goes to UCLA?
The guy from USC. Used to be Phoenix.
Who?
Cliff Kingsbury.
Yeah, Cliff Kingsbury.
Ooh, I like that option. Damn, that was going to be my option for Washington. Damn it.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I think he wants to. Let me tell you, he likes the warm weather. He just really wants to be in that kind of area. I think.
he's not a winner. I don't know why anybody wants him.
Oh,
All right.
but it's UCLA. They
DeBoer-
don't care.
Arbaugh leaves Michigan.
Jed Fish
Oh,
From Arizona.
from Arizona.
Very good.
I think they promote Sharon Moore.
That's
I
what
think that's the
Mullen
other
also
choice,
thinks.
yeah.
Brian Kelly.
Ooh. Yeah, I could see that.
I would
Okay.
love that.
LSU.
Mhm.
I know.
Jimbo.
Who goes to
Ed
who's
Orgeron.
LSU? Who?
Ed
Ed
Orgeron.
Orgeron again? I don't think so.
Les Miles.
I said
Miles is
Jimbo.
back. I don't think so.
I'm going to go with her. I'm going to say Jimbo. I think that's
Okay,
actually
Jimbo
the call.
Fisher. There we go. Okay. Let's see. So Texas, he doesn't have a job. Okay. So who replaces Washington? DeBoer leaves. Well, no, wait. DeBoer hasn't left. Do we think DeBoer's going somewhere?
No. I
Arizona? I don't think so.
I'm wondering a little bit maybe Seattle.
Seahawks.
That's a good.
They'd
You know,
love
it's-
him in Seattle.
They do, but you know what? I want to win games. And
Yeah,
Jim
but if
Harbaugh
he-
wins games. I want Jim Harbaugh.
I mean, yeah.
I think Jim Harbaugh to the Chargers.
Everybody keeps saying that, but the Seahawks is a better job.
No, it's not.
I agree.
It is.
It is absolutely not.
That
You
is
have got
crazy.
better talent around San Diego right now.
You have more
Offensively and
institutional support
defensively.
in Seattle than you. Who cares
I
about a
don't
quarterback?
care.
But if we
You can always get a quarterback.
But if we say DeBoer, we can keep the game going.
Okay.
Yeah, you can always get
Do
a
that.
quarterback. How many NFL teams do you know that draft year after year looking for
I'm just telling you
quarterbacks?
right now, the Chargers is not the gift he thinks it is. He's going to go there and leave in 3 years. If he goes to
He's got-
Seattle, he could be there for 15 or 20.
Yeah, he could
That's
be
what
there
I'm
for
saying.
15 and 20 and not win anything because they don't have a quarterback.
Okay. We'll get into the NFL later. All right. Let's go Washington. Who goes to Washington?
Ryan Grubb.
If he can take Grubb with him to the NFL, he will. But if not, then yeah, they'll just bring up Grubb because he's already as a he's a head coach list. So they'd probably just give it to him.
I had the Arizona coach going to Washington if DeBoer left, but that was
I like
before
Brian-
Bowen put
I
him in
like-
Michigan.
Fish? Oh yeah, maybe.
I like Brian Hartline.
Can
She's
somebody tell
trying-
me why he's that good?
She's
I
just
don't
trying to get
understand.
Moen mad.
I don't
Why is he
understand the
that
heart
good?
line.
Have you seen
Yeah.
the talent he's produced?
Yeah, but he
Yeah.
Working.
How
He's
many
produced, I think,
NCs he
3
have?
offensive rookies of the year in the NFL.
Yeah.
I understand.
Look-
but head coach?
Yeah. I think he's being bred for a head coach. I think he turned
Okay.
down the Duke job, to be honest. I think he turned down the Duke job. And
I'm not saying he's not good. I just don't know that he's a head coach.
I got one for you.
Wait, Jen was saying something.
Oh.
I'm sorry, Jen. finish
Oh
what you
no,
were
no,
saying.
no. You're fine. I was just gonna say I think with Washington's wide receiver success, I think
Yeah.
I could see Brian Hartline. I think I could see it. I really do. I think he would be a splash young hire. I think it would be he'd win the press conference like everybody wants you to win,
Oh,
right?
sure, yeah. That's
And I
true.
think that would be a recruiting like shot to the arm. I really do. Because Washington isn't like a great recruiting school, right? I mean, I'm not saying anything bad about them. They do great in the portal. They do great developing, but I think Brian Hartline for them, like, look, that'd be a splash. That's all I'm gonna
It's an
say.
interesting pick. I just
Yeah,
hadn't thought of that.
don't put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby. Leave Brian Hartline alone.
All right,
What-
Immaculate, go ahead.
Wisconsin's head coach. I have not
Okay.
felt for a while now that that's a good fit based upon what he wants to do.
Does Wisconsin play football?
What?
I haven't seen anything out of Wisconsin in years, so I'm just curious.
What's
I'm
his
sorry,
name?
but
What's his
who's-
name, Moen?
You're thinking of
know
Luke
his name.
Fickell.
I don't even know his
Yes,
name.
I'm talking about Luke Fickell, and I think that him going over to like an Oregon or Washington would be
Oh, okay, yeah, Luke Fickell, yeah. all
because
right.
he wants to do more of that type of an offense of what they,
Right.
what he could do if he's out on the West Coast getting guys out there versus Wisconsin, which has all the beef and and gets some of the best running backs. But
Don't we think that was a mismatch from jump? I don't understand him going to Wisconsin at all.
yeah, he needed a job at the time. I mean, he didn't need it, but that was probably one of the best available. But now with
Right.
all this going on, yeah, I think someone would buy him out. And if with Chris being down at Texas and Iowa looking at grabbing him, Wisconsin might be like, yeah, you go ahead. We'll bring back Chris and keep him from going to Iowa.
Well, Casting for
would make
Chrome
me
says
mad.
Iowa just develops coaches.
Yeah.
Well, that's true.
yeah.
Trying to rile up Immaculate here.
Yeah.
Except for
Sergeant
their
Pickles-
offensive coordinators.
Oh, or yeah, keep it in the family. That's what I've heard.
We're trying to export some coaches right now. It's not working.
Sergeant
I'll
Pickles
take
says,
that DC. Give me that defensive coordinator.
No,
Yeah, not that one.
who wouldn't? Who wouldn't?
Sergeant Pickles says, would rather be UW who does more with less in terms of recruiting than less with more like A&M. Well, I'm always going to say that, but I'm
I agree.
a Husky though. So
I agree. I was just picking somebody who I could see being a splash hire because this coaching carousel is about to get nuts.
right, it is. You're right. It is. There's no
It's
doubt
about to get
it.
nuts.
We got a super chat here. Tony Lawson says, "Does Wisconsin play football?" That's worth $2. Oh, come on, you Big Ten guys. You got to laugh at that.
Oh no.
Funny.
Everyone just takes shots at Wisconsin. I mean,
That was fantastic, Tony. Thank you for the $2, but more importantly, thanks for the joke. I love that. All right, guys, we're wrapping up. We've been 2 hours. I'm going to give you each a time to sort of tell everybody what you're thinking, where to find your stuff, and make sure that they understand what you're covering. So, Jen, let's start with you.
Well, I am on the Renegade Reports. You can find me on YouTube. You can also find me on X, I guess. Are we calling it X? I
We're
still call
calling
it
X
Twitter,
now,
whatever.
yeah.
All right. So Jen Knoll 2013 or Jen Santee 1890. It's all the same. It just depends on how you look up the name. And I have Carlos Williams on Friday on the Renegade Report, former running back for the Buffalo Bills and my
Nice.
beloved Florida State Seminoles. I also have on Tuesday Rob Deloach, who is the dad of Kaylin Deloach on. And if you want to go back and look at some stuff I did this week, we had DJ Uwe Alungale. I think
Yeah,
I
that's
said
right.
that
The
right.
new transfer. Yep.
Did I just say it right? I don't know if I said it right. I'm really Southern. I'm really Southern.
That was good.
His father was on my show. It was amazing. It was so good. And then earlier tonight we had Bryant McFadden on. So y'all go check us out. It's
busy.
super fun. Huh?
I said you guys are busy.
Yeah, I'm tired.
Well, we appreciate you joining tonight, Jen.
I
Really
was
quick,
saying,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I was just going to say it's a good thing I'm a Gemini because I can turn it on. I can turn it off.
Oh boy. Okay. That's good. That's good. Sergeant Pickles says for $1.99, awesome show, everyone. Keep calm and go Dogs. I appreciate that. All right. You came in last, Immaculate, but I'll give you a minute or two if you want to tell everybody what's going on in your head.
Hopefully everyone knows where to find me at on X, talking a little realignment. We're still watching the convention despite Saban trying to steal the show. There's some stuff that came out today that was kind of interesting, but a little slow. I'm thinking we're going to get some big burners coming up. The one funny story coming out was that they are no longer testing for cannabinoids on the guys, so that ought to get interesting. But other than that, I'm expecting to see the coaching carousel now light up like we have never seen before. So as we just did, watch for that. Watch us on X. We're going to be putting out whatever we're seeing happen and letting folks know what's going on. So pay close attention this week. It's going to be a fun one.
We have a show Friday night, so everybody knows. So you can catch our update then. Moen.
You can find me here on the Big 12 Mafia Network. You can find me in my love room in my house here.
Hey, let's keep it safe.
I've got silk pajamas I'm getting ready to slip into and light my pipe and my smoking jacket.
TMI.
Come on over. I mean, we'll have some fun.
We just
I got a bottle of rum. I mean, we'll just
Damn, Moen.
What is going on
coming
right
on
now?
your after dark show or whatever it is you've got because I've seen that. I'm going to come on there. That seems
yeah, you're welcome.
All right. Well, I just we took a left turn there somewhere. So
you asked where I was going to be.
We appreciate everybody being here with us tonight. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you follow everybody on Twitter and then turn on your notifications. Again, we're going to have our show Friday night at 7 Eastern, and we'll run for a couple hours, at least an hour and a half. And we'll catch you up to date on all the college football conference stuff for the college football playoff and also realignment. And now we have coaches rotation and we have NFL stuff to talk about. So it's going to be a big show. We appreciate everybody being here. Everybody needs to stay safe. I'm not going to be with you for Thursday, so I'm going to say peace out for that. And then we'll talk to everybody Friday night. Everybody else, we'll see you later.
Good night, guys.
Peace.